Sifu Tsubei, greetings to Venerable Masters and greetings, good morning to all. This is where we are in the Amida Sutra. We've been talking about Sarupatra, the life of the elder Sarupatra, Lifu, Salafak. So as mentioned at the beginning of the last class, precepts, jie, generally are not an exciting topic for many, and people will quickly lose interest. In case I was not too convincing last time on why we need the Buddhist precepts, let me lay the foundation again from a different perspective before continuing on to the next precept and going too deep into upholding precepts. 持戒, 止业. I would like to make 3 points. First is to clear up on the reasons why we should uphold the precepts. 2 is to clarify the fear of upholding the precepts. And then 3 is to explain why precepts are very essential for human development. The first point, why uphold the precepts? The goal of all the precepts and practices which the Buddha taught his followers is that that absolutely pure, free, illumined state of consciousness, which he called nirvana, nibbana, nibbana. This state is already present in us potentially, but it is obscured by ignorance and illusion. In order to dispel this ignorance, we must cultivate intuitive insight or prajna, 般若智慧, jita bhajna, into the real nature of existence, 真相事实, 真tướng sự thật. But since this insight cannot possibly arise in a confused and wandering mind, 迷惑颠倒, 迷惑颠倒, we must first of all control and discipline the mind until it becomes absolutely calm and perfectly concentrated. This is what is meant by the term samadhi, sanmoti, tamadhi, or sanmei, tamui. But the aspirant practitioner cannot hope to control or discipline his mind unless he not only abstains entirely from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and all the unskillful deeds, such as untruthfulness and addiction to intoxicants, at a minimum, the 5 precepts. But in addition, cultivates their positive counterparts of virtue, such as loving kindness, generosity, chastity, truthfulness, and awareness. The observance of these negative and positive precepts constitutes the practice of sila, 持戒, 止业. The 5 precepts are first taught in the primary school stage of Buddhist spiritual education. The remaining negative precepts, such as the 8 precepts, the 10 precepts, which we currently are discussing, together with all the positive precepts, are taught in the higher classes of the same school, which represents the stage of sila, 戒, 业. So we have 3 stages, right? Precept, meditation, and concentration. 戒, 定, 慧, 业, 忍, 对. So the foundation is 戒. The foundation is precept, 业. Samadhi, samoti, tamadhi, is taught in the higher school stage, and prajna, 般若智慧 jita bhajna, in the collegiate or university stage, if you will, at a higher stage. Graduation represents the attainment of nirvana, nibbana. Then we will have completed the whole course of spiritual education. In Chinese, it's called 无学vô học. What needs to be learned has been learned. What needs to be done has been performed. Of course, we should be careful and understand this correctly. It's not like when you have samadhi, you no longer have to observe the precepts. And it's not like when you have wisdom, you no longer need to practice samadhi. In fact, three are one, and one is three. Observing the precepts helps to reinforce samadhi, concentration. And samadhi helps to reinforce prajna, wisdom. And prajna wisdom in return, minimizes the confusion and fear about precept observance. Without wisdom, we won't be able to commit ourselves to skillfulness, 善法,停法. Precept, samadhi, and wisdom, 戒定慧, 约定对, are not three steps, but together they form a circle that expands as we become more spiritually developed. So it's not step by step where you step on the first step, and then the second step, you forget about the first step. When you step on the third step, you forget about all the first two steps. It's not that, but it's a circle that expands as you become more spiritually developed. Some might think, well, this is a good explanation, but I cannot overcome this fear of violating the precepts, so I don't want to commit to something that I know I won't be able to keep. And won't it be more serious to violate a precept consciously, right? You take a precept, but then you violate it. Wouldn't that be more of a serious matter? Well, this brings me to my next point about the fear and the difficulty in practicing sila, precepts. But let's ask the question, what makes something difficult? Something is only difficult because we think it is difficult. In other words, difficulty is not absolute. It won't be difficult forever, and it can't be, because things always change based on conditions. What's difficult for person A is easy, may be easy for person B, right? So what would make a person think that committing to precept is a difficult matter? And when is a thing difficult to practice? Isn't it only when that thing, what we think is difficult, runs absolutely counter to our long established habits of life and thought? Isn't that the case? That we think is difficult because it is challenging our own long established habits. What this means is that when we find something that challenges our weaknesses, we will find it difficult. After all, the recognition of our weaknesses is the first step towards removing them, right? We have to first recognize our weaknesses, then we will be more receptive to the potentials of our ability of removing those weaknesses. If we bury our heads in the sand like ostriches and refuse to see ourselves as we really are, then it becomes absolutely impossible for us to take even the first step towards the spiritual goal on the spiritual path. Then our spiritual practice simply becomes mechanical performance of rituals, 情绪上的修行, right? 都很真很thức. Without first of all giving up habits and practices which are evil and unspiritual, 不善的习气, right? tập khí bất thiện. Such people are like a man who tries hard to row a boat without untying the rope which fastens to the shore. So no matter how much effort he's putting in, he's not going anywhere. So if we don't observe the precepts, we don't change our weaknesses, and we attend Dharma assemblies, we sit and practice meditation, we read books, we attend lectures, but we are not moving anywhere. It becomes mechanical. The trouble is that the world wants to gain something for nothing without putting in the effort. And the religious sphere is no exception to this rule. There's no free lunch. If we want results, we need to put in the efforts. Perfection is the result. Practice is the progress. Thus the phrase, practice makes perfect. This is why the Buddha declared emphatically that we must cease to do evil before we can learn to do good, like in the Dhammapada. Right? Not to do evil, to cultivate merit, to purify one's mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Otherwise, all our so-called religious practices will be absolutely without result because we're not changing ourselves. Being naturally skillful and perfect is the result. We have to go through the process in order to get to our goal of perfection. This is why precepts are our training, as discussed last time. This is why we should uphold the precepts. If we don't observe these fundamental moral precepts, then rituals are simply useless. And if we do observe them, rituals are virtually unnecessary. Our lives become the embodiment of spirituality, in which case our existence becomes naturally skillful in action of body, speech, and mind. This takes me to my final and third point. Precepts is very essential for human development. We all want to grow, to develop, and to be happier. If we don't grow and develop as human beings, we stop increasing our value as human beings. If we have no value, we cannot feel valuable, which will make us have low self-esteem. As a result, we will have fear and doubt in what we do. Therefore, we cannot be happy. But what makes a person to have value? What makes a person of value? It's only that when one adds benefits to whatever that he or she is involved with. In other words, he adds more benefits to the system than he gains from it. A person of value, giá trị của người có giá trị, will naturally feel confident about himself or herself and his environment. This is called a person of merit in Buddhism. 有福德的人, người có phước đức. As humans, we are motivated towards ever more happiness and avoiding suffering. So it is only natural that we are motivated to grow and develop. Otherwise, if we stop growing, we are being unnatural. In other words, our action of body, speech, and mind would need to be skillful in order to bring value to wherever we go and to become people of value. Observing the 10 precepts is skillful action of body, speech, and mind. Therefore, precept observance is necessary for human development. Okay. So let me go back. Okay. In Buddhist literature, sila, precepts, jie, or yei, is defined as habitual, skillful action of body, speech, and mind. But what do we mean by skillful? Shan, ting. Skillful means disassociated from mental states of greed, hatred, and delusion. Li kai, tan, chen, ci, lir, tam, seng, si. And associated with mental states of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom or prana. Sila is thus the habitual performance of such skillful actions of body, speech, and mind. Here, the emphasis is on habitual, 习惯, tập quán. Sila is not something that you do from time to time, but something you do all the time. The individual Buddhist should be the living embodiment of sila, the living embodiment of skillful mental states. 佛弟子必须要有戒体, right? Phật đệ tử phải cần có giới thể. Sila makes you a true human being. Without it, you are not really human, if you think about it. As mentioned earlier, Sila helps you to grow, helps you to develop. This is why it is the first stage of the threefold path: precept, meditation, and wisdom. 戒定慧三学, tam học, giới định tuệ, taught by the Buddha, and the other two stages being samadhi, concentration, and prana, wisdom. Sila comes first, which is why after reciting the three refuges in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, Gui Phổ, Gui Pháp, Gui Sang, Gui Phật, Gui Pháp, Gui Tăng, we take the 5 or the 8 or the 10 precepts. We go for refuge. We commit ourselves to the spiritual ideal, the idea of enlightenment, to achieve enlightenment. And when we take the precepts, we actually start moving in the directions of the ideal. Therefore, it is important for us to practice these precepts. Sila and Buddhism are connected. Sila is indeed the foundation of Buddhism, but it is not something that exists by itself. Buddhism exists only when people actually practice it. If there are no people practicing Sila, and it's not leading to samadhi and wisdom, then there will be no Buddhism. If there are no Buddhists, there will be no Buddhism. Buddhism does not exist in books. Buddhism exists in the lives of people, of Buddhists. We must practice Sila, 持戒, 止约, because if we want Buddhism to continue, we must practice the 5 or the 8 or the 10 precepts all the time, not just from time to time. If we do that, we will become people of ever-increasing value to wherever we go. We will then lead happy, useful, and progressive lives. This is the spirit of bodhisattvas. These are the benefits. So I hope this helps to lay the foundation for our talks on the precepts, and that the message is now clear as to, first, why we should uphold the precepts, which is for wisdom to grow, for us to uncover our wisdom, because wisdom cannot come to fruition in the state of unskillfulness and mental confusion, but only in the state of skillfulness and concentration. Secondly, we should have the courage and not allow fear of upholding the precepts to arise in us. The only way for us to improve is to face our own fears and to overcome our weaknesses. And finally, understand clearly the necessity and benefits of observing the precepts for our own development. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off last time. In order to maintain continuity from the last class, please allow me to quickly review the first precept, abstention from killing or loving kindness, 不杀生戒, giới không sát sanh. If the first precept of no killing seems straightforward, if we think we can more or less forget about it, we are completely misunderstanding the nature of the basic precepts. They are basic not in the sense that they are something to be, leave behind, but in the sense that they are to be constantly maintained. They are part of us. They are in every fiber of our existence. That's what it means to for something to be basic, not just that we learn and we forget about it. Not hurting or harming living beings is a good start, but if we leave it at that, we are going to be applying the precepts in a fairly crude and unthinking way. It would not lead to samadhi or prana wisdom, 般若智慧, trí tuệ bát nhã. It should be much more creative than a self-imposed restriction on your violent and destructive impulses. It means letting go of hatred and developing respect and friendliness towards people and animals, including the invisible spirits. It also includes the quality of mindfulness in one's relations with others. This is a more complete understanding of the first precept of no killing or loving kindness. So we should understand both the negative and the positive counterparts of the precepts. Now for the second precept, not to take on what is not given. In the Kunda Sutra, it lays the definitions of the second precept as follows. The Buddha explains first the violation of the second precept in a skillful, unskillful way. And the second is that he talks about how to observe the precept in a skillful way. And the Buddha says, he takes what is not given. He takes in the manner of a thief things in a village or a wilderness that belong to others and have not been given by them. So this is unskillful. And then in the sutra, he talks about the skillful bodily action. The Buddha says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given. He does not take in the manner of a thief things in a village or a wilderness that belong to others and have not been given by them. So this is skillful. Just as the first precept, being not simply a matter of not killing, even though the negative form of the precept is constrained in those terms. So the second precept, 不偷盗, không thâu đạo là không ăn cắp, it's not simply a matter of not stealing. And in this case, the negative form of the precept does in fact make it quite clear. Traditionally, it is called adina dana, veramani. Veramani means literally abstention from. Adana means seizing or grasping, 取 or 偷来. And adina means not given. So together, adina dana veramani means abstention from taking what is not given. In other words, it means not taking or appropriating that which another is not willing to give. Why is stealing a serious offense? It can be easily seen in the first precept that taking another being's life against his will is committing violence to that person, right? In the case of the second precept of no stealing or not taking what is not given, the not given is therefore a form of violence. It is a violence committed not in respect to that actual person, as in the case of physical attack, but in respect of his property. He and his property, 我跟我所 tôi và sở hữu của tôi, complete his existence. When his property is taken against his will, his existence is no longer complete, thus violence to him. This is why it is serious. Since taking the not given is a form of violence, all that has been said about force and violence in connection with the first precept is relatable and can be applied to the second precept. For this reason, it will not be necessary for us to deal with the second precept at quite the same length as the first precept. Loving kindness or compassion is the positive form of the first precept of no killing. Generosity or giving dana, 布施 bodhi, is a positive form of the second precept of no stealing. Loving kindness is giving itself. Loving kindness is a self-giving of person to person, or if you like, a surrender of person to person. Surrender here means the complete abandonment of any advantage derived from power mode. In other words, to give up the thinking of what's in it for me when I do things for other people. Generosity is a giving of property to another person or to another being, and is an expression of loving kindness. Where loving kindness exists in its fullness, there is no question of even generosity, because ultimate loving kindness can only exist in altruistic no self, 无我, vô ngã. No self is incompatible with the sense of ownership and therefore with property. Ownership is to take. generosity is, or sharing is to give. For Buddhism, ultimately, as in the case of the Bodhisattva, Pusa, Bhutan, generosity reaches a point where the giver, the gift, and the recipient of the gift stops to be distinguishable, meaning you don't have attachment to that person. Oh, I'm giving to that person because he's poor. Or look how rich I am, how powerful I am that I have the ability to give. And here is my precious gift to you. So there is no attachment, no distinction. We give because of generosity, because of loving kindness, because it's the right thing to do. It is the kind of generosity that constitutes the positive form of the second precept of not taking what is not given. 不偷盗, không thâu đạo là không ăn cắp. Therefore, the second precept is not just about abstaining from what is not given, but to be generous in giving what is needed by others. Generosity is also a form of the first precept, that one not only abstains from taking another person's life, but also protects life. The consequence of taking what is not given, especially something that is precious as life, is violence that comes back to the doer. About 8 years ago, there was a kind of a shocking and mysterious news report. There was a college student who had a bright football career. He was then picked to play for the New England Patriots team of the NFL, National Football League, and quickly became a rising star. And it was reported that when he was at a nightclub, another football player did something to offend him. So he went out to his car, grabbed a gun, went back into the nightclub, and shot that football player. He was later found guilty and sent to prison. However, prior to that accident, he had also committed 2 other homicides. When he was in a prison cell all by himself, he was found dead. What happened was that he took his own life by hanging himself from a window with bed sheets, with religious writings on the walls in blood. The report blamed the illegal drugs that he took that drove him to suicide. But I think that was likely that his conscience was getting to him. The guilt was probably unbearable, for killing other people he knew. It was unbearable to him. Whatever the cost may have been, that drove him to suicide. We know that after all said and done, no one feels good about killing another human being. In the Buddhist scriptures, there was a famous prince named Ajatasattu, Taitsu, who was under the bad influences of Devadatta, Chipotato, Devadatta, to conspire to kill his own father, King Bimbisara, which he eventually was successful by starving the king to death. He later became king, but had great remorse for causing the death of his own father. This story is described in detail in the Visualization Sutra, 观无量寿经, 观vô lượng thọ kinh. Taking life or property from others without their consent is a form of violence on others. The greater the violence, the greater the momentum and the higher the probability of violence coming back to the doer. So one should be mindful to avoid violating the second precept and committing violence towards others and their properties by taking what is not given. There are many ways that one can violate the second precept, such as taking the time or taking the energy of another person against his or her wishes. We take time from another person when we force ourselves upon them, when they have work to do, or when we force them to listen to us when they have no wish to hear. This form of adina dana, or seizing or grasping, 取 or 图 or 来. The not given is very common in modern social life. Buddhists should do their best to avoid it, both inside and outside the spiritual community. Taking energy or vitality of another person against his or her wishes, which is closely connected with taking their time, is even worse. Here, one forces oneself upon another to such an extent and compels them to listen to one's complaints or appeals or tirades for so long that one eventually reduces them to a state of physical prostration, please let me go, emotional exhaustion, and even nervous collapse. I personally haven't seen this, but it would be very bad, right, to drain people of their energy. This is not to say that one may not take the time and energy of another, even drain them, if one really needs to do so, and if they are themselves willing to give their time and energy to this extent. For example, when we are part of a Dharma assembly and we try to put together a successful event, sometimes it requires hard work, and we need other people to do their deeds, to do the work properly. So sometimes it is necessary that we ask them to put in the extra effort to do their good work. So it depends on the case, but we should not impose on them to listen to our own complaints when they have no wish to listen to us. Then in that case, we find somebody else to listen to us. I'm just kidding. There are two aspects associated with the second precept that are not usually clear. One is gratitude, 感恩, nhớ ơn. The second is indebtedness, mắc nợ. When someone gives you something you need, and especially when they give it to you freely and willingly, the natural human response is to feel grateful. If you don't feel grateful, then something is wrong. Why is that? If one is spiritually unhealthy, one is incapable of satisfaction. If someone does us a favor and gives us what we need, and we don't have gratitude, then our attitude is one of seizing and grasping, right? 取图. Real gratitude can only be felt when you take from another both what you genuinely need and what they are willing to give, right? And at that point, you feel very grateful for their help because you really need their help, and they're really and happy, willing to help. That's when you feel grateful. And true individuals not only feel but express gratitude. So the second aspect is indebtedness, 负债, mắc nợ. The connection between indebtedness and the second precept is not always appreciated. For example, willfully withholding from another person the money that we owe a person, money which he wishes us to repay and of which he may be in need of, is to be guilty of taking that which is not given, and therefore a violence. Not paying a debt is a violation of this precept. It also means that as long as a debt is still unpaid, one cannot in fact give dana, 布施, boti. In other words, cannot practice generosity, 不可能修布施, không có thể tu bố thí. Because one's so-called dana, 布施, boti, will be no more than a robbing of Peter to pay Paul. And Paul himself, if he knows what the situation is, will be virtually a receiver of stolen goods. If a person borrows money that he cannot pay to donate to the poor, then that is not giving dana, 布施, boti, for that money is just a stolen good. I should be clear about this. Indebtedness 负债mắc nợ. In this context, does not, of course, include being in debt to a bank for a loan, which must be repaid by a certain date, and that one is in the meantime paying interest. You are fulfilling your obligation, so it's not a violation of this precept. Responsible and good debts would not be a violation of the second precept of no stealing. There are generally 4 criteria to determine if one has violated the precepts. And these 4 criteria you can apply to the other precepts. One is so they are intention, object, method, and result. First, with intention, we should ask the question whether we have violated a precept or not. Is, did we intentionally want to commit that offense? Whether killing, stealing, or lying. If there's intention and joy in the misdeed, then the more serious the offense, the greater the consequence it will be. Next criterion is object of the violation. Is it a human being, an animal, a spirit? Is it big or small? Does it have merit or lack of merit? It's like 有福報或缺少福報的眾生, right? 眾生có phước báo hoặc là không có phước báo. So generally speaking, the bigger the being in physical size, or the more intelligent the being, the greater the offense. Of course, killing a human being is the greatest offense. The next criterion is method. Did you use a method that caused harm or a method that did not cause harm? For example, you're very angry, but you're using a stick form to strike a person. It won't hurt him. So it's not a serious violation. But if you were to use a knife, that would definitely hurt that person. That would be a serious violation. And finally, result. Does it result in that person dying? For example, if you had the intention to kill a person with a knife, and to strike him in his chest, and he was critically hurt, but the doctor was able to treat the wound and he finally recovered. In other words, the incident did not result in his death. Your attempt to kill him would not be a violation of the first precept, meaning your misdeed would not prevent you from attaining enlightenment, but it might result in him coming back to hurt you in return as a karmic consequence. If you met all the 4 criteria of intention and joy, merit as a human, method that can cause death, and the result is death, then the offense is called unrepentable offense. 不可悔罪. Tội không có thể sám hối được. 不可忏悔. Or if you have the intention to steal and you meditate on it, you plan and plot to steal from a person, you steal with your own hands or use computer scams or even charms or magic spells to steal, and the other person's property is stolen as a result, then this is seriously and fundamentally violating the second precept. The karmic consequences of taking what is not given by others, by the owners, include poverty and financial insecurity. The karmic rewards of upholding this precept are wealth and financial security. All right, so in the second precept, it's not just about not stealing, but the full understanding of the second precept is to be generous in our giving. So we should practice both the negative and the positive form of the precepts. The third precept is abstentions from sexual misconduct. That's the negative form. The positive form includes contentment, and loyalty. The third precept in this case, abstention from sexual misconduct is described in the Kunda Sutra. As shown here, the Buddha explains from the unskillful perspective, he engages in sexual misconduct. He gets sexually involved with those who are protected by their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their relatives, or their dharma, meaning the caste. In this case, the will be the caste, I think. Those with husbands, those who entail punishments, and even those crowned with flowers by another man. This is how one is made impure in 3 ways by bodily action, meaning violating the first 3 precepts. So this is unskillful. From the skillful perspective, the Buddha says, abandoning sexual misconduct, he abstains from sexual misconduct. He says, does not get sexually involved with those who are protected by those who are protecting them. This is how one is made pure in the 3 ways by bodily action. This is skillful. Abstention from sexual misconduct is a precept for the lay practitioners. The monastics, however, will have to uphold the abstention from sexual conduct. So those who can live a celibate life is already living the pure monastic life. Leading a celibate life is indeed very difficult. Overcoming sexual desire is extremely challenging. In the chapter 42 chapter sutra, chapter 24, the Buddha says, there is no desire more powerful than sex. Sex is a desire has no equal. Fortunately, there is no other like it. If there were, no one in the world would be able to cultivate the way. So this is extremely difficult to overcome. For the majority, they can live a life without killing anybody or without stealing other people's properties. But to ask them to live a celibate life without sex is an impossible thing to do. This is only difficult because one doesn't understand this precept. One is turning this desire into a very scary monster to overcome. Once we see it in the correct perspective, we will be able to see the solution to this problem. And leading a celibate life is not difficult after all, for those who are aspire to do so. But again, the 3rd precept is sexual misconduct for the lay practitioners who have family. However, if we want to go for the higher aspiration to cover, which we should because we want this to be general enough to cover both the lay and the monastic lifestyle. Obviously, the solution is not to suppress sexual desire. It will only backfire. I think there are 2 solutions to conquering sexual desire. One is short-term, the other is long-term. The first solution is a long-term solution, which is to develop wisdom of voidness, 空正见, 空真kiến, that allows one to see the true nature of the desire, which ultimately doesn't exist. It is only a problem because one has provided the conditions for it to occur. One also understands that nothing can exist on its own, forever unchanging, and that everything changes based on conditions. So this is the proper way of seeing the world. If one knows how to remove the conditions, then the desire disappears. This solution is difficult because it is difficult to always remember and sustain the application of the understanding of voidness, 空性,空当. The second solution is through the practice of contentment, 满足,小欲知足, 调有. tri túc, might be more practical, and in a way, it is an intermediate solution. To understand contentment, it helps to see it within the context of the traditional Buddhist cosmology, which is described as a three-tier universe or triple universe, san jie, tam giới. The mundane existence is what is made up of the three-tier universe. It's divided into three planes, as it were. The second plane is higher than the first, and in a sense that it is more refined, more positive, more blissful, and more luminous. And then the third is even higher than the second. So as you ascend your conscious development, you achieve a higher state of existence. So the three planes or worlds or spheres, san jie, consist of sensuous desire, kama loka. Loka means world, yu jie, dục giới, and the archetypal form, rupa loka, se jie, sak giới, and the no archetypal form, arupa. Here, I'll show you. Arupa loka, meaning realm of formless. The plane of sensuous desire, yu jie, comprises in ascending order the hell world, the world of hungry ghosts, the animal world, the world of asuras or anti-gods, ashulo, atula, the human world, and the world of the lower gods, from the great kings, from the four great kings, 四大天王, tứ đại thiên vương, up to the gods who control the creations of others. 他化自在天, 自在天, 他化自在天. So this is going to be a little bit technical, but it helps to understand this context of contentment, so please bear with me. The plane of form, rupa loka, se jie, sak giới, comprises altogether 16 subplanes from the heaven of the gods belonging to the company of the Brahma, Fan Tian, Fan Tian, up to the 5 pure abodes, Jing Ju, Den Gu, which are inhabited by non-returners. The third fruit of sagehood, Anagami, San Guo, Anahan, Guo, Tamwa, San Guo, Anahan, and Tamwa, Anaham. The non-returners are those great spiritual beings who have developed transcendental insight to such an extent as to break the 5 fetters binding them to the plane of sensuous desire, 断五盖乱nam jing gai, so that they will no longer be reborn in the samsara. And the third plane is called a realm of formless, arupa loka, comprises 4 subplanes, all of which are inhabited by Brahma, Fan Tian, Fan Tian, a class of spiritual beings superior even to the gods. Much could be said about these 3 planes of conditioned existence, but for our interest, all that concerns us at the moment is the fact that the planes of form, the realm of form, se jie, sak giới, there is no such thing as sexual dimorphism. In other words, no separation into male and female. In the realm of desire, you still have a distinction between male and female species. But up to this realm of form, there is no distinction of sex. Since spiritual life consists essentially in a progression from lower to higher planes and worlds, spiritual life also consists in a progression from the state of biological and psychological sexual dimorphism to a state of spiritual neutrality or spiritual non-duality, 不二法. What I'm trying to say here is any state of division between you and me, or male and female, there will always be conflict and tension. Similarly, a state of sexual dimorphism is a state of polarization and tension. It is also a state of discontentment and dissatisfaction. So again, what I'm trying to say here is that the state of spiritual neutrality is a state of harmony, relaxation, contentment, and satisfaction. So observing the third precept, therefore, does not simply in abstention from various well-known forms of sexual misconduct, but also, more importantly, in the experience of contentment. So how can one achieve the state of contentment and satisfaction? Well, before I answer that question, I have a story to share with you. There is a story in the Dhammapada, verse 60, Phải Chư Jing, Kinh Pháp Cú, about King Pasenadi's suffering due to his intense sexual desire. So one day, King Pasenadi was going out in the city, and he happened to see a beautiful young woman. And so he fell in love with her. But then he later found out that she already was married and had a husband. And so what he did was he wanted to have her. So he sent for his husband to serve the king and to do this impossible errand, to do a task that is that's very impossible to achieve. The king's intention is to kill the husband if he fails to come back in time and to take the wife for himself. Meanwhile, King Pasenadi obsesses with sexual desire and cannot sleep, and keeps thinking, how he should get rid of the husband in the morning and take his wife. At about midnight, he hears some eerie sounds. Actually, these are the mournful voices of 4 persons suffering in the realms of hell, 地狱. Hearing those weird voices, the king is terrified. Early in the morning, he goes to see the Buddha as advised by his queen, Malika. When the Buddha is told about the 4 voices the king heard in the night, he explains to the king that those are the voices of 4 beings who were the sons of rich men during the time of Kassapa Buddha, for Gayip, and that now they are suffering in the hell world because they had committed sexual misconduct with other people's wives. So then the king comes to realization of how evil the deed is and the severity of the punishment. So he decides then and there that he will no longer covet another man's wife. The king says, after all, it was on account of my intense desire for another man's wife that I was tormented and could not sleep the whole of last night. It has been warned that sexual desire will bring suffering eventually. So let's go back to the questions. How can one achieve the state of contentment and satisfaction in order to overcome this unskillful desire? Because it is not effective to be suppressing, but it is more effective to find a solution to resolve it. If one wants to overcome the state of sexual polarization and tension as an intermediate solution, it is to do so with meditation. I say intermediate because the long-term solution is really to have wisdom in order to eradicate unskillful deeds. Meditation can only suppress the desire, but it really takes wisdom to eradicate our unskillfulness. Obviously, to give in to sexual desire would be like pouring gasoline into fire. Meditation is like pouring water over fire to put it out. Why is that? Meditation is a positive state when tension and discontent, where tension and discontentment don't exist. In meditation, the state of sexual dimorphism is transcended, 超越, vượt qua. In meditation, one ceases for the time being to be either male or female because you are just concentrating on that meditative state of mind where you're not focused of your sexuality. This is because in meditation, in the sense of samatha bhavana, samatha bhavana, meaning development of calm, 修止, tu ji, ji wan, ji của ji wan. One progresses through the dhanas, 禅定, 挺人, or states of higher consciousness. While meditating, in the sense of actually experiencing dhanas, 入定的经历, nhập định, kinh nghiệm của nhập định. At that moment, one is therefore a deva or Brahma, right? Fan Tian, Phạm Thiên. The Sanskrit word for which we call celibacy or chastity is Brahmacharya, Fan Qing, Phạm Han, which really literally means practicing or living like Brahma, Fan Tian, Phạm Thiên. In other words, not merely abstaining from sexual activity, but transcending sexual dimorphism, on which sexual activity and sexual desire are based. This is for monks and nuns, but lay practitioners can also be aspired towards living a pure spiritual lifestyle. We should avoid activities that encourage sexual tension. This is not simply to avoid sexual misconduct, but more positively to give lay practitioners some relief from the tensions of sexual polarization and to transcend the state of sexual polarization and eventually to progress on the path to enlightenment. From all of this, it also allows not only that abstention from sexual misconduct is not enough, not only that one must experience contentment, but that one should not think of oneself as being either a man or woman in any absolute or exclusive sense. Because by thinking that we are not developing wisdom, we think that we are a man forever or a woman forever, and therefore we behave in a certain way and we are not allowing ourselves to change, to go beyond this dimorphism, which is the conflict, the tension. So living a pure spiritual life is not negation, but transformation, not evasion to run away, but progression to bypass it, to surpass it, 超越, right? vượt qua. So as far as the third precept is concerned, especially in its positive formulation as contentment, this progression is from an absolute identification of one's psychological sex, meaning that you just think you are who you are forever, and that either I'm absolutely a man or woman. You go from that stage to a relative and provisional identification, meaning that you think that you are because of your conditions, of your karma, your attitude that defines who you are. So you are conditioned. You're going from something that's fixed, not changing, to something that's conditional. But we should take one step further to go from this relative identification to no identification at all. In other words, to our true nature of voidness, 空性, 空当. Because from the beginningless of time, we were not a man or woman or any particular being. We are how we are today because of conditions. So if we understand that, we know that our unskillfulness is because of the conditions that we provide to feed, to grow our unskillful desires. But if we know how to remove those conditions, then these unskillful desires will no longer exist because there are no conditions for them to exist. If we can only see this, we shall understand the third precept more deeply, And because we understand it more deeply, we shall observe it with greater confidence. So hopefully that theory and practice will, theory and practice are clear that the difficulty in upholding a third precept can be resolved. One last thing before we end about the third precept is to talk about another positive counterpart of third precept, and that is loyalty. When one commits the transgression of sexual misconduct, phạm不邪淫, phạm giới bất tài dâm, one is no longer loyal to one's partner. Loyalty is what holds a relationship together. Loyalty is what absorbs the bumps in life and allows a relationship to go on smoothly. Loyalty is what keeps, it's like a glue that keeps a relationship together. When one is loyal to one's partner, one does not allow minor mistakes to break up the relationship because one is focusing on a bigger, the bigger goal. One understands that as mundane human beings who doesn't make mistakes, but one focuses on the bigger goal of why the two came together in the first place, such as taking care of one another to raise a good family or to collaborate to support a greater cause to help society, whatever the case may be. As we have seen in the story earlier, how King Pasenadi was coveting another man's wife, but his wife, Queen Malika, was neither jealous nor angry. She saw his suffering and the torment and tried to help him by advising him to go see the Buddha. She was able to overlook his mistake and did not lose her goal as a Buddhist, which is to help all sentient beings. Similarly, if we are not loyal to our goal of attaining enlightenment, we will be distracted by the worldly pleasures. The karmic consequences of violating the third precept of abstaining from sexual misconduct can bring torment and discontentment and suffering in the realms of hell. And one will encounter people who will be disloyal to him. The karmic rewards for upholding the third precept include contentment and satisfaction in life, restful sleeps, and meeting people who are supportive and loyal. As a result, the third precept, the precept holder will have support and loyalty of other people and will be able to accomplish greater things. So again, we should understand the precepts in the negative form, but also the positive counterpart too. So it's not about suppressing our unskillful desires, but to find ways to have this contentment, to experience something that is greater. Because the only way that for us to give up something that is inferior is to have something that is superior, right? We cannot force to give up something that we have difficulty in giving up. But one easy way is to have something that is even better. And contentment, restful sleeps, happiness in life will be able to allow us to give up something that is unskillful. Okay, so the next is the fourth precept, but I will cover this next time we meet. So let's summarize and conclude for today. Okay. Okay. So what I attempted to do today was to solidify the ground for why we should uphold the precepts, which is for wisdom to grow, to develop. Wisdom cannot be uncovered in the state of unskillfulness, 恶法, ác pháp, and mental confusion, 迷惑,顛倒,迷惑,顛倒, but only in the state of skillfulness and concentration. And precepts can help with skillfulness and concentration. We should not avoid upholding the precepts just because we fear that we are imperfect. Perfection is the result. Practice is the progress. Practice makes perfect. And the only way to improve ourselves is to face our own fears and to overcome our weaknesses. We talked about the necessity and benefits of observing the precepts for our development. We should not only observe the negative form of the precepts, but also the positive form. For the second precept, we should avoid taking what is not given, but we should also be generous in our giving. For the third precept, it's more than just avoiding sexual misconduct, but we should find contentment in the spiritual life. And then we will cover the fourth precept next time, and that is telling the truth and trusting others when they tell the truth. And we will explain why this is important and how it's relatable to our daily lives. I wish you all a happy holiday season. Be safe and be warm.